A Canadian decision to revoke an invitation to China is coming under fire. Chinese troops were set to visit the country for a military training session. That's after Canadian soldiers traveled to China in 2018. An unusual 5-year-long agreement expires between China and Switzerland. It allowed Chinese agents to seize Chinese nationals in Switzerland and take them back to China. Facebook fact-checkers are receiving money from a company linked to the Chinese regime. This as they ramp up their crackdown on what they call fake news. Mass virus testing has proved lucrative for Chinese hospitals amid the pandemic, but questions rise over one hospital that may be publicly celebrating it. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Facebook says it's been cracking down on fake news, but the fact-checkers it hires are receiving money from a company linked to the Chinese regime. NTD's Penny Zhou has more.
Facebook says its army of fact-checkers are independent, but a recent report shows they may be funded by controversial parties. An Epoch Times article says that Facebook fact-checker Lead Stories is partly paid by a firm linked to the Chinese regime. That's according to Lead Stories' official website. The company says its funding sources so far this year include ByteDance, which is the Chinese parent company of TikTok. TikTok says it is working with companies like Lead Stories in order to further aid the efforts to reduce the spread of misinformation. ByteDance works with the Chinese Communist Party's police agency. The company signed a contract with the regime's Ministry of Public Security last year to train the police on how to spread their propaganda on social media. ByteDance itself is flooded with misinformation. On TikTok's Chinese platform, viral videos are rampant claiming the CCP virus was leaked from a U.S. lab and brought to China by the U.S. military. Most were published by Chinese state media on the platform. Lead Stories is among the most prolific fact-checkers of Facebook's U.S. content. Half of its fact-checking staff are CNN alumni. Facebook's fact-checkers need to be certified by the International Fact-Checking Network. The nonprofit is funded by eBay's founder and major Democratic donor Pierre Omidyar, as well as Google and progressive billionaire George Soros. Neither the fact-checker nor ByteDance have responded to the Epoch Times request for comments. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The Canadian government is coming under fire for the prospect of allowing Chinese troops to train in Canada. Canadian soldiers took part in winter survival training in China back in 2018. In return, Canada invited Chinese troops to come for similar training sessions in Canada. Documents showing the arrangement were obtained by Rebel News. Canada's top military officer decided to cancel military exercises with Chinese troops in 2019. That was by request of the U.S. military. The U.S. expressed security concerns about military-related knowledge that could be delivered to Beijing. A January 2019 email from a Canadian Defense Department official reveals that out of the Five Eyes intelligence agency, only the United States raised security concerns. The UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada did not share the concerns. But Global Affairs Canada, the Foreign Affairs Department of the Canadian government, objected to the decision. They pointed out that China might see the change as a retaliatory move related to the Meng Wanzhou case. In 2018, Canada arrested Meng, the CFO of Chinese telecom gear company Huawei, by U.S. request. Shortly after, Beijing detained Canadian citizens Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Canada confirmed on Thursday that it has canceled the training sessions with Chinese troops. Released documents also show a number of other planned engagements between Canada's military and the Chinese Army, also known as the People's Liberation Army, or PLA. Among the planned activities, PLA members were set to attend a security studies program in Canada, as well as teach peacekeeping courses in Canada. While Canadian forces were scheduled to teach peacekeeping courses in China, Canadian delegations were also to attend fleet review and training centers in China. For the past 5 years, Chinese public security agents were able to seize Chinese nationals in Switzerland and send them back to China. This was part of a secret China-Swiss agreement. A human rights NGO, Safeguard Defenders, published the agreement this Wednesday. Generally speaking, readmission agreements are a customary part of international law. However, the NGO said this secret deal is of an entirely different character. The China-Swiss agreement reached in 2015 was not publicly known until a Swiss newspaper uncovered it this August. Safeguard defenders found some terms of the agreement questionable. The most striking thing is that the agreement was signed with China's Ministry of Public Security, not with the Immigration Department or any equivalent, as is usual with other countries. China's Ministry of Public Security oversees the country's police force rather than immigration affairs. The agreement also didn't require Switzerland to verify the information provided by the Chinese agents. That means if the Chinese Communist regime identified a Chinese dissident as a criminal, Swiss authorities just accepted it. On top of that, Swiss authorities did not have any say over whom China selected as agents to enter Switzerland and agreed to keep the agents' identities secret. The agreement raises human rights concerns. It's not new for the CCP to use extraterritorial abductions and forced returns to repatriate Chinese nationals. The NGA also worries this agreement provided the CCP agents a channel to travel freely in other European countries across the borders without a passport or other controls. A wind farm in Texas is under the spotlight. The owner is a Chinese businessman believed to have strong ties to the Chinese Communist regime. The property is near the Air Force's largest pilot training base. The federal government has the power to block such investments for national security reasons, but chose not to. Investment firm founder Kyle Bass has deep concerns after visiting the area. He tweeted that the landowner can bring people and cargo in and out of Mexico with little oversight. Texas Senator John Cornyn tweeted that the government is reviewing the situation. Now we look to a Chinese hospital. Netizens said this hospital is too happy to be able to earn money through the pandemic. A banner is hung in a prominent position in the Third People's Hospital in Chengdu City. It says, "Cordially celebrate our hospital becoming a designated hospital for coronavirus testing." This photo has been going viral online and roused the anger of many Chinese netizens. Earlier this week, multiple confirmed cases of the CCP virus have been reported in Sichuan province. Chengdu is the capital of the province. The authorities then announced they had locked down many areas in Sichuan and required residents in some districts of Chengdu to be tested. The cost of testing differs from $15 to $30 each, depending on the hospital. 16 million citizens live in Chengdu City. If authorities required all of them to take part in mass testing, this would be a several $100 million business for hospitals and authorities. Some netizens ridicule the hospital's banner, saying the hospital finally got a chance to make a good fortune. That is why they are celebrating. The hospital has now removed the banner and said the banner was to tell the public that virus testing was available. The hospital admitted the wording was inappropriate. The city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the CCP virus outbreak months ago, has not reported any new locally transmitted cases since May. But life there isn't back to normal. Locals complain they don't know what is going on. Olivia Chan reports.
For 38-year-old Wuhan restaurant owner Lai Yun, life has never been the same after the city became the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. Before the city began a grueling 76-day lockdown in January, Lai started most days the same way, a trip to the Huanan seafood wholesale market, where the first cluster of cases was detected. 1 year on, the market still stands empty. Lai, who reopened his restaurant in June, has to get his ingredients elsewhere.
Now we stock up through certain supermarkets. These goods cost me about 240 to 250 yuan today. If we bought from the Huanan seafood market like before, we should be able to get the same amount of goods for half of the price, about 120 yuan.
On the second floor above the empty market, shops selling glasses and optometry equipment are open. This week, a guard at the entrance to the eyewear market took temperatures and warned journalists not to take videos or photos from inside the building. In Wuhan, the city has not reported any new locally transmitted cases since May, but for people like Lai, whose income has decreased and relies on the market, it's still difficult.
武汉人现在你看到的热情和他们的
Now you see enthusiasm and optimism in Wuhan people. But in fact, people still have huge trauma deep in their hearts. If there is a clear statement, even if it is confirmed, we could face it correctly. But there is no way to face it now, and I don't know what is going on. So I still hope that we can get an official statement, if possible.
A 23-member vaccine advisory panel votes to support the emergency use of Pfizer-BioNTech CCP virus vaccine. The vote could lead to mass distribution. The Food and Drug Administration will likely make their final decision and official authorization quickly. It would trigger a mass distribution effort. The panel voted after an all-day public hearing. They were asked if the benefits of the vaccine outweigh its risks in individuals 16 years of age and older. 18 to 14 voted in favor with 1 abstention. The doctors who voted to abstain says he agrees the vaccine is safe, but doesn't see the data supporting usage by 16 and 17-year-olds. The government pledged to distribute 2.9 million doses of the vaccine within 24 hours of FDA approval. Government officials in Beijing are forcing the demolition of more than 3,000 families' homes. Local residents find this outrageous and are risking their lives to rescue their home. NTD's Becky Zhou has the story.
Beijing residents in the neighborhood of Xiangtang Cultural Village of Changping District are struggling. Authorities are forcing around thousands of families to leave their homes this winter. Many homeowners refuse to abandon their properties for demolition.
He said if you don't move out in 7 days, he will cut off the water and electricity and put you on a blacklist of poor credibility. He is worse than a fascist. Many elderly people live here and this is their only place to live. They have nowhere else to go. It is very pitiful. Like the second Cultural Revolution, many people are suffering.
Authorities there are refusing to recognize home ownership certificates issued by the regime at the local level. A court decision says these properties are illegal and officials shall demolish them. Officials put up notices on the walls of houses in early December. Residents have 7 days to empty their homes upon receiving the notices. If anyone fails to obey the court order by Wednesday, the authorities will coerce them to move out.
The government made the mistake putting up notices and tearing down my home. I contributed to our country and the party. I understand everything. I'm so angry. It's the government's mistake. They've swindled ordinary people.
Local authorities developed and constructed the Xiangtang Cultural Village project around 1995. Singers, photographers, calligraphers, and veterans live there.
This is demolition of illegal properties, so there is no compensation for sure. Whose interests are on the line? There's no doubt that we're very much against it. Many people moved out. Some are doing it now.
Many residents have signed their wills with red fingerprints. It signifies they are willing to die to save their properties. Beijing residents in other neighborhoods are experiencing the same predicament, such as Jiuhua Agricultural Science Demonstration Park. Reporting by Becky Zhou, NTD News.
An ex-Hong Kong lawmaker is urging the U.S. to cut off China's ATM. That's what he calls Hong Kong's financial system, adding that depriving China of it will force the regime back to the drawing board. More on that story from NTD's Don Ma.
What they did to Hong Kong is they want a complete control on Hong Kong, and why they try to do so is that they need Hong Kong to be their ATM to support their own economy.
Hong Kong lawmaker Bajio Long now seeks political asylum in the U.S. That's after China ousted him for his human rights activism work. He said on Friday that the U.S. should block banks in Hong Kong from using messaging network SWIFT. It's used by banks around the world to send and receive information, like details for money transfers. The network uses the US dollar as its currency. Barring China from the system would hit the country's economy hard.
China's economy is not that strong as years ago. For our China economic circle, the mortgage and the housing part is just like what was happened in US in year 2008. If any one sector that got crushed, the other part will go crushed too.
Hong Kong's economy is significant to China, and the US dollar is at the heart of it. The idea to block Hong Kong banks' access from the US dollar came earlier this year after Beijing imposed its national security law on Hong Kong. If realized, the move would deal a heavy blow to the international financial hub, and by extension to China. That's because investments heading to China from overseas companies must go through Hong Kong first. It's widely believed that Hong Kong's freedoms are being eroded following the national security laws passing. The rule says anything Beijing considers subversion, secession, or terrorism is punishable by up to life in prison. Liang says Hong Kong's political situation is much worse than people think.
Every day, when we wake up when we look at the mobile screen, the first thing to pop up is that who of our friends are being arrested, who of our friends is being sentenced to jail, and who of them is being appealed because the regime wants the heaviest punishment on them. And this is our daily life.
Long also points out that communist China poses a threat to the entire free world.
I think this is not a problem of Hong Kong versus China or US versus China. It is the free world versus the largest dictatorship that we have met.
As part of the agreement made in 1997, when Britain handed Hong Kong back to China, Beijing had promised the city 50 years of a high-degree autonomy. This means China's communist system cannot be practiced in Hong Kong until 2049. This is Don Ma reporting, NTD News.
Now we turn to a Chinese staff member working for media outlet Bloomberg. China detained a member of Bloomberg News bureau in Beijing. She's been accused of endangering China's national security. Hayes Fan was last in contact with one of her editors on Monday, shortly after plainclothes security officials escorted her out of her home. 3 days later, on Thursday, Chinese authorities confirmed to Bloomberg that she was detained on suspicion of what they called engaging in criminal activities that jeopardize national security. A Bloomberg spokesperson says the company is concerned for her safety and will do everything possible to support her. Fan, a Chinese citizen, started working for Bloomberg in 2017. The regime only allows Chinese nationals to work as assistants for foreign news bureaus in China. Independent reporting is not allowed. On Twitter and LinkedIn, Fan is listed as a global business reporter for Bloomberg News. Foreign media operating in China have come under increasing pressure. China has expelled more than a dozen journalists working for U.S. media this year. In August, Beijing detained a China-born Australian citizen working for Chinese state-run broadcaster CGTN, also on suspicion of endangering the country's national security. And in September, Australia helped 2 Australian foreign correspondents leave China after they were questioned by China's State Security Ministry. The United States is taking further steps to crack down on China's role in American telecommunications. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is taking steps to revoke U.S. access from China's largest telecom company. It's called China Telecom. As of 2017, the internet service provider had more than 150 million customers. The FCC's chairman said on Thursday that several federal agencies recommended the move, citing national security concerns. The FCC noted significant concerns with China Telecom. One of the biggest, that it's forced to comply with the Chinese regime's requests for information. Back in April, the Justice Department and other federal agencies called on the FCC to revoke China Telecom's ability to operate in the United States. The largest mobile operator in Europe, Vodafone, is censoring websites in the UK relating to a peaceful Chinese meditation practice. Here's NTD's correspondent in the UK, Jane Worrell, with the story.
It was a red message for adult content, and it was so weird because I have been accessing this website for the last 17 years, every day of my life.
Natalia Nutting told us she found websites relating to an ancient style of meditation practice labelled as adult content. This happened after she switched to the network provider Vodafone this month. Why would a harmless self-improvement practice that is good for all ages be labelled adult and blocked? In the UK it's freely practiced, but in China, Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is banned and severely persecuted by the Chinese regime.
We have freedom of belief, freedom of information. All throughout the week, I've been very, very sad, very, very sad. I really want to speak out.
Vodafone told her the only way to gain access was to put in her credit card details to verify her age. She decided to cancel her contract. Vodafone UK has previously said it uses a mix of Nokia, Ericsson and Chinese tech giant Huawei's equipment for its 4G and 5G masts. According to its website, Vodafone partnered with the Chinese firm Oppo in May this year. Top cybersecurity expert Casey Fleming says companies like these can be pressured into killing free speech when doing business with Beijing.
The Chinese Communist Party wants to control absolutely every facet of the Chinese people's lives. For a company or a website to be on a blacklist or an organization to be on a blacklist, that's not done by accident, that's done by decision.
To put it to the test, I also purchased this Vodafone mobile Wi-Fi hotspot, connected to it and tried to access Falun Gong websites, and I was blocked and it said it was adult content. Other blocked websites also include the Chinese language version of NTD's sister company, the Epoch Times. I contacted Vodafone's press office, but Vodafone did not provide a response as to why these websites are labelled as adult content in the UK. Chief executive of the non-profit Falun Dafa Information Centre points out similar cases of censorship in the US. They may come from unofficial agents of the CCP who make calls to software vendors.
Very pro-Beijing Chinese nationals, either spurred on by the consulate or just in their own group, will call these software vendors who do restrictions on either phone or a corporate network or what have you, and tell them all kinds of lies about Falun Gong. It scares the software company, and so they start putting Falun Gong websites on 8 restricted, categories, which is completely false.
A UK petition earlier this year also said that using a Vodafone home broadband router prohibits access to Falun Gong domains, blocking them as adult content. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Now we turn to viewer questions. China imported nearly 100 million tons of grain in the first 11 months of this year, making a 30% increase year-on-year. Some viewers questioned the increase. The reason being, based on China's population of 1.4 billion people, 100 million tons of imported grain seems like an excessive amount. But not all of that grain is for human consumption. Corn, for example, is widely used as animal feed, and soybeans are mainly used for producing soya products, including cooking oil. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you next time.